I'm Erica Hollingsworth, and you're listening to the F1 podcast.
What's up, everyone? It is Ricci here from the F1 podcast. Today is June 19th, 2024. Recording this a couple of days before the Spanish Grand Prix. I'm here with my co-host, Andrew Cleary. How you doing, man?
Doing well, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Good to have you back. You've been a little MIA lately. I think we saw online you got married.
I did. I got married to my beautiful bride, Brett, this past weekend. She was gorgeous, made me look about half as good as she was. So it was really an amazing time with family, with some childhood friends, and couldn't ask for any better weather. So it was just an immaculate day, went seamlessly, and recommend getting married to you. You too. It's a fun day.
Noted. And oh, speaking of the other guest we have here, Tyler Hatherell, our Red Bull expert. Tyler, welcome back to the pod. We've missed you. And did you have a fun weekend in Montreal with us? Big espresso martini guy, Tyler Hatherell. He loves his espresso martinis.
Do a barrel roll.
What an intro. Thanks so much for having me. Yeah, I don't think I've been on the pod in quite a while, so I appreciate the extended intro. Yeah, we were at the race together in Montreal. What a time. Many espresso martinis consumed, many a Heineken's at the track. It was a great time. Capped off with a nice max win. So as the resident Red Bull expert, as you introduced me as, I'm pretty content with that weekend.
Three Red Bull wins in Montreal. So it's been a pretty happy for you. And every year I've gone, Ferrari's done worse.
You should almost contact Max's team, Tyler, and tell him that, hey, I'm 3 for 3 when I'm in attendance. Let me in the paddock every weekend for you, and I'll give you some good luck.
Yeah, seriously. And the opposite for Ferrari, as Jono mentioned. I think they've gone from barely scoring points to out of the points to DNF. So it's just getting worse. I don't think it can get worse from here. So only can go
I,
up next
I
year.
both do not start the next race that you go to. That would be rock bottom.
Okay, but we have a lot to talk about in this week's episode. The dust has settled on the Canadian Grand Prix. It was a great weekend for us. However, there's a lot of news that has come out from this past weekend. And mind you, those that don't know, there was the incident. There's a number of instances that happened that weekend, whether if it was crowd control to, Pitbull being canceled, apparently fans being turned away. And this is just an open question to everybody. So the tourism minister, I think it's the Quebec tourism minister, said she was ashamed of the series of fails at the Canadian Grand Prix this weekend. She says, I did not like what I witnessed this weekend. And she told reporters Wednesday as reports emerge of organizational problems all week. And, those that visited that weekend, I think you had a mix of weather. It was obviously, everybody knows Montreal in the summer is construction season. So you had a number of that, a number of the highways traffic galore. And then obviously if you have 400,000 people trying to get onto an island, that subway is going to be quite busy. Andrew, I think you're probably different because you have not been to Montreal yet. So I think Tyler and I will have a different opinions.
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like I have a bit of a unique view on it in that I can only speak to the experience that I had, which was all positive, honestly. And I think it helps that, we'd been two other times before, and so we knew what to expect going in, things like the crowds and the chaos getting out of the racetrack, given, as you mentioned, 300,000 people all arriving at the track at different times, but trying to leave at the same time. And so that inevitably creates chaos trying to get to the metro because there's only one way off the island. And so that was busy, but honestly, for us, I don't think it was ever too bad. The longest we waited, I want to say, for the metro, maybe 45 minutes, maybe an hour. It really wasn't anything, too crazy. And the experience that we had at the track was all positive. I think, there were a lot of improvements made certainly to the Lance Stroll grandstand where we've had tickets the last few years that made the fan experience even better than previous years. So from my end, again, didn't have pitball tickets, so I wasn't offended by that cancellation. Wasn't impacted by getting turned away on the Friday like some people were. Didn't have multiple hour waits to the metro. So from my view, it was all positive. So hard to complain. But it sounds like other people had very different experiences.
When a province or a government is going to have some sort of big event like this that comes into your city, a lot of people know that the Grand Prix is like the kickoff to the Montreal summer. And although the weather was not as ideal as they wanted, it just seems like there was a lot of unorganized for a city that has hosted this Grand Prix so many years in a row. It did. I think like on Reddit and stuff like it sounded like total chaos compared to what we experienced. I mean, to talk about like the experience about the Metro, the only reason why we waited 45 minutes is it was the Sunday, and the Sunday is known for the most busiest day, and we try to spend as much time as we can on the track just to avoid that like cluster going home.
It's interesting to hear a lot of the comments. They're always negative, right? They're not going to be positive in that case. So it's great to hear that, Tyler and John, that you have very positive experiences from that. I think we should obviously shed on that case, but more so, the negative attention is going to get, the first media outlook in that regard. So the best way to handle this is just use this as experience, right? And then implement measures for next year and for years after to not only handle what's only going to be an influx of amount of people every year going to this event, but then now you have an idea of what the weather could potentially look like in worst case scenario, and then how do you handle that going forward from a logistical manner, both from personnel and from like a fan's point of view too. And then also as fans, we should learn what to do next time going to Montreal. Should we be going back to Montreal? What do we do the next time this case happens? In that case, get to the track earlier, right? Plain as day. Get to the track earlier so that you can spend as much time there and potentially avoid any of these potential variables that do come up that may ruin your quote unquote fan experience. Unfortunately, yeah, you can't avoid construction, but maybe the city of Montreal has to do a better job of rerouting the detours so that then it's an easier path of travel for the fans to get to their hotels and so on and so forth in the downtown core with regards to that. But Pitbull, man, I thought you give us green lights. You gave us red lights this weekend, dude. I was so why do you cancel? This thing was getting pitched for months. I kept seeing like the ads on TSN all the time about how Pitbull's coming to Montreal, and he canceled last minute with an apology. I need to be better here, Pitbull. That's unacceptable.
50% off tickets the night before selling when you were walking out of the Metro.
So either wasn't going to be well attended then because of people are going to be offering you like massive discounts. Maybe it just wasn't caught on in that regards.
And like just to add to that point is like I remember Tyler, if you can back me up here, like when Martin Garrix came on in 2023, I think it was, or last year, he was technically his performance was still in the actual Grand Prix venue. So my understanding is you had to leave the racetrack, go into another check-in area on the island for this Pitbull concert. So like even as you're trying to leave Saturday, you had like people trying to leave the race, then you had swarms of people trying to go to this Pitbull concert. And it was not part of your Grand Prix ticket. You had to pay separately. So then you invited a whole new group of people to experience or try to experience this concert that didn't happen. And then that just made it even a cluster.
I was just gonna say, I think that's the problem, right? That they charged for the concert. I mean, the fact that he didn't show a side, the whole point of having an artist headline the end of the day is you keep people on the premises longer so everyone doesn't stampede for the Metro at the same time, right? When we went to Martin Garrix last year, it was packed afterwards. And when we left to go to the Metro after the show, it was empty. We got on the Metro, got home, it was perfect. That's the whole point of having that act to draw some of the volume away from the Metro so there's not a stampede all at once. The fact that they charged for Pitbull really made it difficult for people to rationalize spending more money. We're already spending $600 or more for a 3-day Grand Prix ticket. Like that's just not going to be the draw to keep people at the track. And so I think that only compounded the issue.
What F1 could take, or Liberty Media could take off of, is an example from the RBC Canadian Open every year. When I went in 2019 to Hamilton, they did this past year, and they do like the concert series on top of the attendance, right? So included within your day pass ticket, you have then tickets to the concert at night, which is located on the venue. So for instance, the year, 2019, when I went on the Friday, we had tickets for the full day, and then you had access to watch Florida Georgia Line on another hole of the course. But it was included within your ticket, and it was on site. So if you could find maybe somewhere on the track, may sound crazy, but like potentially in the hairpin section on the off, like off the track there in the hairpin, if you could fit people and have an event there, I think that might be something that you could do where you incorporate that type of entertainment, but with, as Tyler, you mentioned, your $600 ticket, which is already astronomical as it is for a weekend viewing experience, right?
And it's going
Uh,
up. And it's going up
Right?
15%.
So there should be some entertainment involved with regards to that is at the track and not in some other location. And that's probably why these tickets were then being sold for 50% off. And probably a big reason why then if Pitbull didn't come because, it wasn't getting as much hype or as much attendance as he would have liked for him to then make the trip worthwhile or worth profit for him.
I think they tried to put it in an area like because like I think the Grand Prix Heineken fan zone, whatever you want to call it, they had last year was like sufficient. But if I think they tried to think of it like, let's get more out of this, and that's why they try to go to this like I guess this area additional to the island. Anyways, some of these irks can like piss Liberty Media off and be like, that thing that happened last year? Well, we're gonna make it a little bit more difficult this next year in negotiations.
What's the current contract though for a Canadian Grand Prix at Circuit Gilles
I think
Villeneuve,
it's
isn't it?
2032. I want to say they locked up a long-term contract just before COVID, I want to say. So they're locked in for quite a few more years.
So at least they have that going for them, in Montreal. So or 2031. So still you have like the next 7-8 years to really be able to make a mark on it. If it's one bad year, it is what it is. Learn from your mistakes so that, in 2025, these mistakes are addressed should these events happen. But, traditionally this always works out when there's like the elements you can't control, right? The weather you can't control. And that was a massive rainstorm there, right? Just seeing some of the videos, I'm just like, holy shit. No wonder why it was going to be just a chaotic mess.
It's you plan for all types of weather in Montreal. So let's go kind of into the next segue. So the Formula One exhibition has been announced that after a successful month in Vienna and I think Toronto, that they're going to be going to London, England, for the London XL Center. The first North American F1 exhibition in Toronto saw record-breaking pre-sales, further highlighting the huge appetite for us visitors and fans. And like we definitely had the opportunity to attend. So I think what they're going to have there is the once upon a time in Formula One, drivers and duels, the design lab, which looks at the technology of the car. Pretty much, I think it's the same kind of exhibition that like the one that we saw in Toronto, Tyler.
The United Kingdom is the home of Formula One, if you think about it, and has such a rich history with the sport. I think the fans there are going to have, just an incredible experience, just like we had in Toronto, just like the fans in Vienna had as well. Heard really great things about the first two stops in the tour and had a great experience myself in Toronto. And so if you happen to be in the area or are in London, highly recommend you go. It's totally worth the price of admission.
And you get to have a chance to drive an F1 car through their state-of-the-art sim. So, that to me is worth the price of admission to begin with.
I am so bad at the sim.
Plus, you get to drive in Silverstone, which is like a ton of fun.
3 back-to-back races going into which is going to be exciting kind of couple of weeks for this season. Spanish Grand Prix this weekend. A number of teams are going to have upgrades, and a lot of eyes are going to be on some of those big teams. Is how is Red Bull going to respond this weekend after Max Verstappen had a very successful weekend, despite some challenges in qualifying in Q3? How is Sergio Perez going to respond after a dismal qualifying? Is the Mercedes the new car that's going to be the one to compete with? Is McLaren still going to be powerful? Like, there's a lot of like big things going into this weekend, and I'm curious. I'll start with you, Tyler. How do you foresee that whole Checo Verstappen mindset going into the weekend if you're Christian Horner?
I mean, I think you see it the same way you have for 20 months now, where it's Max and then Checo significantly behind. I mean, what would be a successful weekend for Checo in Spain? P6? Like, would you
A
walk away from a
Q3
P6 and
appearance,
be
maybe.
a Q3 appearance and maybe he gains a few places in the race and finishes sixth? Like, are you going to be disappointed with that? Probably not. And I think that speaks volumes as to how we rate the current form of Checo. So I think nothing's changed in that front. I think Checo's got a lot to prove. I mean, I know he's got a new contract, but at the end of the day, it's a 1+1 show me deal, right? And the thing about Red Bull is that at any time you're at risk of being dropped to the sister team, right? I don't think that there's a risk of that happening to Checo this season. I think the sponsorship and I think the spot that they have currently in the constructors is safe enough for the time being. That may change shortly. McLaren, who looks very racy, and the Ferraris are, close behind, but Checo's got to deliver. It's been two races in a row where he's been knocked out in Q1. That's unacceptable in a top team. And two races in a row where he's been unable to score points, which is unacceptable in a top team. And so there's a lot of pressure on him. And I think that's only going to amplify if we go into the next three races and McLaren is as competitive as we think that they are, and Mercedes is as competitive as they think that they are. And if Ferrari can mix it up as well, I mean, we've had four different race winners this year. And so I think that only puts more pressure on them to deliver because if Red Bull is going to win the constructors year after year, they need two drivers to deliver points. And right now it's a one-man team.
Aston Martin, what are you looking for this weekend, Andrew? It is Fernando Alonso's home race as well as Carlos Sainz. And, Alonso has won the 2006, 2012, and the 2023 Spanish Grand Prix. So like, on the when it's come to the I think recently those at home Grand Prix have done well in the points or have even won. Especially I think we did see some successes for Aston Martin this past weekend or 2 weekends ago in Montreal. Lance Stroll getting into the points and Fernando looking pretty strong with that tussle with Lewis Hamilton in the race. And I'm just what are you kind of thinking for this weekend?
Yeah, to me, Montreal was kind of a welcome surprise. I didn't anticipate them to finish. I anticipated maybe one car to finish in the points, not both, especially not P6 and P7. Scoring 14 points is their biggest haul on the season, which was great to see. But, obviously it's a step back from where we are last year. But who knows? Barcelona is going to be the test circuit that is going to determine where everybody's on the pecking order right now. It is traditionally a test circuit for F1. We are now we're nearing the mid-season where I think this is this is the race that determines where we're going to be at for the rest of the year in terms of performance. And if Aston Martin can pull one out of their bag this weekend and showcase some positivity, going forward with maybe some potential upgrades, which I hate to say are always downgrades, but one can only be optimistic in this case, that if Alonso can do well in his home race, I think this will be a good Kickstarter for the factory to get that positivity back in so that then we can kind of push towards the end of the season in that regards. But I'm cautiously optimistic in that case. I don't want Montreal just to be a one-off, but I think this could be a great opportunity for Alonso to score some points at his home race. But the real question, Ricci, in my opinion, is how does Ferrari bounce back? Because that was abysmal last weekend. There's no question behind that. But they've proven that they can perform. And, Red Bull, I would say, got lucky last weekend because with Checo being out and kind of both Ferraris not scoring points, that gap did not close in, right? It kind of extended a little bit for Red Bull and the constructors. And, Tyler, as you're mentioning, Red Bull, Checo has to step up because otherwise Ferrari are going to come clipping at the back of Max's heels and Red Bull's heels with regards to points. And we need the Minister of Defense to be able there to help fend for his teammate, but also score some points for the team.
I'll build on that piece that you asked, Andrew. I think the big thing for Ferrari is it's not only the bounce back. We're a weekend where somewhere we talked about this earlier in the season. If Sergio Perez is going to have a dismal qualifying and Max is going to be alone there, Max can prove that he can be vulnerable. Mind you, the safety car did help him in Montreal. So you're hopeful, and especially maybe Carlos Sainz maybe needs that extra juice because he still hasn't found a seat for next year. He's struggling. Time is running out, and going to his home Grand Prix, maybe that'll give him that extra excitement and just seeing his home fans of just maybe I need to perform in front, and especially that always fun rivalry against Fernando Alonso at their home track or at just being in that Spanish Grand Prix. Yeah, and especially with I don't know if we'll talk about it today, but the McLarens, if they fully took advantage of Ferrari's dismal performance in Montreal. So Now the gap is getting significantly closer. I wouldn't say it's crisis moment at Ferrari yet, but if it's another double DNF, knock on wood, I hope it doesn't happen, then I'd be starting to sweat a little bit more today.
Yeah, I think crisis might be a bit too far. You're coming off one race removed from a race victory from Charles Leclerc. Both of your drivers have won a race this year. I think there's lots to be positive about if you're a Ferrari fan. P2 in the championship, you're chasing down Red Bull. But I do agree that, in a wild turn of events, we've gone from Red Bull domination to all of a sudden four teams look competitive. Would anybody be shocked if somehow Hamilton was able to win this weekend? I don't think so. The Mercedes looks competitive. McLaren's competitive. Ferrari, we've talked about. And Red Bull, while they may only have one car, we know the guy piloting that one car is the quickest man, out there. And so I think all that does is put a lot more pressure on all the top teams to deliver, because I think if you're not on it in a given race weekend, you could find yourself easily, seventh or eighth, because the other three teams, if they're delivering, are going to be able to, have the pace to, score major points. And so I think that only makes it more interesting. And to your point, Ricci, I think all the more interesting for Ferrari to get it back on the rails. Although what I would say is that, it's been a pretty successful year. And if you were to ask yourself at the beginning of the year, through 9 races, 2 victories, a clear second in the constructors, would you take that? I think you take that every day of the week.
Oh, yeah, there's no question about it. I just do not want this, it's the Ferrari little, you don't want that little bug to
It's the
stage.
doubt creeping in.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
We're checking. So as other teams struggle, let's focus on some of maybe the lower tier teams. We talked about how Williams, Logan Sargent is under a lot of pressure, and Vow's even admitted that, he must do more to save his seat. There is rumor of Ocon going to Haas, but I don't know which team we want to tackle first. I think let's state the obvious. Logan, he's still got that seat somehow, and he hasn't been dropped.
I have a feeling Sainz is going to be. There's been lots of rumors and a lot of, let's say, push behind the fact that Sainz is going to be in that Williams seat in 2025. So I don't know if really Logan has any more opportunities to, provide Vow's a way to save his seat right now. But, in the event that, there's nothing being confirmed. So it really is do or die for Sargent. And it's a matter of not crashing out right again, and just being able to keep it on the track for all also, I don't know, I think it's 66 laps or 68 laps of the Spanish Grand Prix this weekend. And it's tough because now that I think the whole American push, especially with Doralton Capital, just now kind of being divested out of it, it's really not a thing of a concern for Williams to have that American seat. So I at this point, I hate to say it, but I don't know if really Sargent can do anything from this race onward to really protect a seat for next season.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be interesting to see, and I'm sure Williams has all the metrics on this, but how much of an impact has it really made to have an American driver in one of their seats? To me, it doesn't feel like there's a whole lot of buzz. I can't remember seeing, the stands packed with Sargent shirts when we're going to Miami or Vegas. It's Red Bull, it's McLaren, it's Ferrari, it's Mercedes. Americans more than anything else like to follow winners, right? And if you're not in a competitive car and you're not in that conversation, then I'm not sure how much brand value to the table. And so Williams is probably looking at it and saying, I'm not sure what financial incentive we're getting by having an American. We might as well have someone who's quick. And it's not like Carlos Sainz is marketable. He's arguably significantly more marketable, outside of the US than Sargent is. And so, you put all that together, it seems like, all signs are pointing towards Sargent losing the seat, and it's hard to argue otherwise.
And just to add on that point for Tyler, the amount of Americans that we met in Montreal, actually a huge amount of Americans go to Montreal for Grand Prix. None of them were Williams fans, to be honest with you.
Because it's all about brand value in North America, right? It's a matter who, as you mentioned, Todd, we love winners, right? We cheer for teams that love to win. We cheer for people that love to win. So that is what F1 in America has become, right? Is whoever's winning is who they're going to cheer for. And lately it's been Red Bull. and it's been Mercedes before that, right? And more or less, Miami and Vegas are just these spectacles that a lot of celebrities go to because of the location that it is, right? As well. So I don't think not having Logan Sargent in the driver lineup is going to hurt anything going forward in America in terms of the races, because there is a clear track and clear path. There, fans are still going to go to these races, and they're still going to be spectacle events no matter what they do. So I see there's no loss of brand value really in terms of having Sargent out for next season. I think though, like the team that we need to really discuss about, and there's a lot of hype, obviously, again, because we listen to a lot to the British media, but is Mercedes. Mercedes is pipped to have a quote unquote very good weekend from what I hear, based on the new front wing that they've introduced. Is it questionable? Red Bull's making a case to the FIA to say it's illegal. I don't know if that's just maybe tactical or if there's actually a case to be made there. But in my opinion, there's a lot of turmoil going internally in terms of between Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes. I think that's pretty evident to see. This divorce has not gone well, just based on not showcasing social media highlights of of Hamilton in that case, and as well. But I think Total Wolf says that they're excited to see what Barcelona can showcase in terms of truly where they are, their performance wise, and people are feeling that the new front wing is going to be a catalyst to them making improvements in the car. I'm just curious, what are your two thoughts on the overall Mercedes situation? But where are they going to finish this weekend in Catalunya?
So it's like they kind of wanted to do a public relations campaign because they had James Allison on the F1 as it the F1 Beyond the Grid podcast talking about how confident they are going into Barcelona. It seems like this is a huge play for them and the boosting that morale going into like which was a start started as an unvery I don't know what you call it, like not a very good start of the season, and then you see those team infighting between Russell and Lewis. I mean, look, we saw it like firsthand in Montreal how they were pretty quick on the grid. And I think at a track like Barcelona, if these upgrades are the upgrades that they talk about, like they could compete for more podiums. I can see that for the Silver Arrows. Like you kind of never doubt Toto Wolff. Like he'll figure it out some way or another.
Yeah, I mean, I agree as well. I think this is a big weekend for Mercedes, not to state the obvious, but I think, and Andrew alluded to this earlier, but you can't hide from Barcelona. It's the ultimate test of Formula One aerodynamics. It's the perfect balance between, you have a lot of medium and high speed corners where you need an efficient downforce package, but there's also a couple long straights. And so you also need to have a car that's not very draggy. And so teams are having to make that compromise. And ultimately what you get is the strongest cars are the ones who are able to handle both, right? And so if Mercedes is strong here, what that says is that they're likely to be strong the rest of the year and that maybe they have really found something. Whereas if you look at Canada, there's a lot of factors you could point to that it's potentially a one-off. We had changeable conditions. Mercedes has always been really strong in Canada. If you look back the last couple of years, Hamilton was on the podium last year in what was a terrible Mercedes. And, we had similar conversations after the Canadian Grand Prix last year. Those fizzled out. And so I think it is a really critical weekend for them because if they are able to show genuine pace, then I think it bodes well, not only for the rest of this year, but into next year as well. In the last year of these regs that, maybe they can really compete. And so whether that's Russell or Hamilton, that's another question. But I think, if they're going to be competitive the rest of the season, they have to show up this weekend.
And if history shows it, like Lewis Hamilton has 11 podiums at the Spanish Grand Prix. He's one behind Michael Schumacher and four ahead of both Fernando Alonso and Max Verstappen that are tied both at seven. Interesting to note that both Fernando Alonso and Lewis Hamilton, I think historically set a record for the longest, I don't know if it's competitive F1 rivalry streak in the terms of them racing against each other or something like that. Just also goes to show how old Fernando Alonso has been racing in F1. I don't even think the iPhone was out when he won his championships, or maybe like the first generation. So I do favor, maybe if we're gonna get into predictions, I do favor Mercedes on the podium this weekend. So if I were like I would go maybe a Verstappen, I'm feeling confident in a Carlos and then Hamilton and then competing with maybe an Alonso. Those are my top three.
I'm gonna go a little different. I'm gonna go Max, Lando, and have to go those two because they've shared the most 1-2s of any combination this year. And then third, I'm gonna go Leclerc. I do think Ferrari is gonna turn up with some pace. So Max and still takes the win. Lando second, Charles third.
I'm gonna go a little different than you, Tyler. I agree. I think this has kind of become like a bounce back weekend for Ferrari in that case, just because bad luck goes it happens in a while, right? You've had a great run up, and every team is gonna have that at some point. So I think Max is gonna pull it out this weekend. He's very successful at this track. Clearly, evidence shows he's won his first ever Grand Prix here, right? I think he'll do well. I think he'll go P1. I'm feeling a Charles P2, but I think this is Oscar's time to get onto the podium ahead of his teammate this weekend, and it's time to start really shining as a McLaren driver. So I'm gonna go P3 for Oscar. With regards to Fernando, I think P7 or above might be the play. I think that would be great for him in terms of scoring some points for the Aston Martin team, but time will only tell. Because again, you can't hide here at all. And we're done with a lot of the kooky tracks out of the year, right? Monaco's done. Canada to a certain extent is also done. The tight street circuits of like Jeddah and Melbourne done. We got some open track racing now for the next few races, and that's where really the bulk of the points is going to be made up. I think in these next 5, 6 race weekends.
Oh yeah, I mean this is the best time of the year, in my opinion. The best stretch of the calendar. You go back to Europe, you hit some incredible circuits. We're going Red Bull Ring in Austria. We have Zandvoort coming up with the fans, Silverstone, Spa. Like it doesn't Monza. It doesn't get any better than those tracks. So I
Ring,
completely agree
right?
with you. Hungaro Ring, everything. It's nothing but bangers, and so I completely agree. This is the stretch of the season where there's no more gimmicky tracks, and all you got to do is show up, and we're gonna find out who the top teams are. In short order here.
So much to talk about and so much to watch with the Spanish Grand Prix this weekend. It is Ricci here from the F1 podcast. Andrew, always good to see you. And Tyler, Mr. Red Bull expert, thank you for graciously giving your time to us. Thank you as always, and putting up with me at the Grand Prix and Erica's reels. So surprisingly, he didn't have to hold the camera the whole time. So good.
Shocking.
Yeah. Uh, and we're also on Linktree. That's a big also announcement. So one of the big things that we heard from our fans, it was hard to find all of our links to all of our social media pages. So nevertheless, we do now have a Linktree where you can follow us on Instagram, Spotify, TikTok, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Threads, and Twitch. Much easier to say that now than just doing it off the cuff. We are at 132 followers on Instagram. Let's continue to get that up. Also, good to see a lot of our fans and a lot of collaboration with others at the Montreal 2 weekends ago. And for that, this is the F1 podcast. Thank you for listening to this week's episode. Andrew, Tyler, always appreciate it, and we'll see you in the next episode. Take care, everyone.